Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Maximum Recognition, Minimal Effort, How Financial Services Meets Millennials' Emotional Needs. I'm your moderator, Zoe Fernandez, from Merkle's marketing team. Before I introduce our speakers, and we get to the webinar content, I'd like to share some information about Merkle, as well as some key housekeeping items for you to keep in mind throughout today's webinar. Please ask questions throughout the webinar. We'd love to hear from you. We'll dedicate the last 10 minutes of our time here today to get into as many of those questions as possible. To ask a question, you can either submit them by clicking on the Q&A icon on your screen, entering your question and hit send, or by tweeting them to us using @MerkleCRM and the hashtag #MerkleWebinar. If we don't have time to get to your question during the Q&A portion of today's webinar, our speakers will email you a response in the coming days. If you'd like to revisit today's webinar, a recorded version will be available to you, and we'll forward an email with a link to the recording in the coming days. For those of you who are not familiar with Merkle, here's a few quick facts about us. We are a data-driven, technology-enabled global performance marketing agency with over 3,700 employees, and we recently became part of the Dentsu Aegis network. Merkle's passion is helping the best brands in the world create competitive advantage through people-based marketing. To lead today's webinar, we are joined by three industry experts. First, Brian Campbell, who is our Senior Director of Financial Services Strategy here at Merkle. Brian has over 20 years of financial services marketing experience on both the client and agency side, and his expertise lies in multi-channel CRM database marketing, targeted online and offline media, loyalty marketing, and payments. Next is Ethan Hansen, who's the Director of Digital Marketing and Consumer Research and has over 10 years of marketing experience with a focus on research, analytics, and strategy. He has conducted hundreds of one-on-one consumer interviews to drive neuroanalytics strategy. And our third presenter today is Mike Adamson, who is the Senior Manager in our Customer Experience Strategy team. Mike has over 9 years of advertising and marketing experience with a focus on creative and brand strategy. His expertise lies in aligning brand messaging to customer needs for mutually beneficial relationships. Now I'm going to hand over to Brian for today's content.
Thank you, Zoe. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. As you can see, we have a great cross-functional mix of regional and national banks that have joined us on today's call. Many of you are clients of Merkle and very familiar with our deep expertise in financial services. And for those of you who are joining us for the very first time, welcome. We hope that you will become familiar with some of Merkle capabilities and our expertise after this. In today's discussion, we're going to walk through three crucial millennial insights: why millennials buy, three key millennial desires in terms of purchase, and specifically we're going to deep dive into what are the motivational desires when millennials move through the purchase funnel and decide to convert, why and what products did they purchase from financial services companies, and number three, lastly, we're going to touch base on how to best personalize experiences for millennials. What's the right messaging, and how do you speak to them in the right channel? Let's go ahead and get started with a little bit of background about millennials. We know millennials have different mindsets compared to older generations. They have grown up in a time of rapid change. They have grown up in the age of technology born between 1980 to 2000. If you think about 1980, when this generation was first born, one of the key events that occurred was the launch of Pac-Man. How many of you on the phone remember Pac-Man? I certainly do. Pac-Man was the first video arcade game ever that started the 100 billion, yes I said 100 billion video game industry that exists today. If you also think about the tail end of this generation, those born in the year 2000, you'll recall Watch UK, the challenge of home computers. The greatest fear was, will personal computers survive after the year 2000? Will we continue to be able to utilize ATMs? There is a pronounced theme of how technology has impacted this group, and we're going to address the impact of digital to this generation that they've grown up with. Why are millennials important to financial services? How do you frame millennials' buying power and the market opportunities specific to financial services? In 2015, millennials actually exceeded baby boomers as being the largest living generation. They represent $2.5 trillion in U.S. buying power as of year-end 2015. That's really the market opportunity that exists for all of us on the phone. And the key is, how do we capitalize against this market opportunity? We've spoken to the fact that they embrace digital technology. 87% say that they trust new financial services technologies. 55% say that they prefer to do everything related to their personal finances on their phone. So what does this truly mean? It means they love technology and they trust Google and Apple, but they value in-person interactions as well. So that means while half of them go online, they interact via digital channels, they go to your respective site, they also still use the physical branch. Roughly 51% still use physical branch locations. Typically that is to solve a problem, or if they need to have a conversation about a complex transaction. So what we know is that 1 in 4 has a person that they know and trust at their primary financial institution, and 1 in 4 expects to have a financial advisor in the future. We have seemingly endless data about millennials. We know so much, but so little. We need the so what. This research and presentation is going to help you answer the so what. Keep in mind, before we dive into the insights further, true brand intelligence lives at the intersection of head and heart, where their emotional self meets the analytical self. Now I'm going to turn it over to Ethan, who's going to continue this conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian, and for the introduction. So it's great to be here today, and I love that quote. So I love that we're trying to, tie both the head and the heart together, and we're really thinking about the emotions of our consumers here. Oftentimes, I guess we find ourselves focused on the what, right? And then other times we get very deep into the emotional side. But what we often forget or miss is tying those two worlds together. And when we tie the head and the heart together, I really believe that's where the real power comes to light. And so what we did is we conducted a study across 3 different areas. We looked at auto insurance, we looked at mortgage lending, and then we also looked in the digital wallet space, and really tried to go through the understanding of why while tying it back to the what. And as I said, a lot of times we end up focusing on the what. Like, what is it about these products and services, that are benefits to the end consumer? But then, that next step is really, the why. And a lot of times we end up guessing at that. When it comes to auto insurance, is it security that people are seeking? Specifically millennials here. When it comes to mortgage lending, is it all about the rate, or is there something more that individuals care about? When it comes to digital wallet, is it convenience? And what we know is that they are driven by something more deeply. And if that's the case, how do we get to that understanding? And so I'm gonna take a next couple of minutes here to talk about methodology and how, my viewpoint and our viewpoint on how you get there, because it can be a very complex space. As you can imagine, you start to enter the minds or the hearts of consumers, and it starts to get complex. So, I know that you can't answer this question over the phone verbally, but I do want to have you answer this question to yourself. If you're in a room with people, please feel free to say it verbally. If you're by yourself, I guess by all means, you can talk to yourself when responding. So let's say that you commute every day to work, or if you telecommute, think of a place that you go to often, like a grocery store or something like that. And this is the question I'd ask you. Have you ever found yourself driving to that location and arriving, and then thinking back, how did I get here? I don't recall making each decision to turn, but somehow I arrived. Maybe you were thinking about something else the whole way to your destination. So here's why. This is the reason I kind of proposed that question. And I would imagine most of us probably said yes. I've done that before. I've driven to work every day for the last years. And this is why. So I love the work of Daniel Kahneman. He wrote a fantastic book called Thinking Fast and Slow. He really dives into the brain, but he breaks it down fairly simply like this. He says there are systems in our brain. On one side, he calls it System 1, and on the other side, he calls it System 2, which is pretty straightforward. So System 1, it's very instinctive. In fact, the majority of the decisions that you and I make are instinctive, and in some cases, they become very habitual, almost like the example that I gave you before. Sometimes they become habit-forming to the point where we sometimes think less and less about the decisions that we're making with the products and services that we are buying. And then on the other side of the brain, we have System 2. It's a little more analytical in nature. It's a little slower in our thought process. We use this side of the brain when we're making more difficult decisions or new decisions. If you think back to maybe the first time that you commuted to work, that was probably a very different experience than having traveled there, for several years, let's say. And so I think the question that I'd ask myself next would be, if a majority of the decisions that our consumers are making are more instinctive, then how do we uncover those decision processes and then tie them from head to heart? So first up, let me use an example here. If I was to sit down with somebody one-on-one having an interview, I might ask something like this. What drives you in your purchase decision of, let's say, mortgage lending? And somebody may respond to me and say, well, Ethan, I'm really looking for a company that provides excellent service. And this is something very common to all of us. We know that obviously service is important to many people. But if we were to take that and dig a little bit deeper beyond the attributes of the service or brand and ask them why that's important, they may say something like, it's a trusted company, or that's what it communicates to me. So there's some kind of consequence. In this case, it's a benefit, right? It's a good consequence here. And that excellent service communicates to me that it's a trusted company, and then we start to realize, okay, so now we're going to understand what they really want. But if we continue to go further beyond that benefit to understand what's really personal to them, we might find then that when they see that a company is a trusted provider, to them that provides confidence. And to them, and maybe confidence of their decision that they made, and they feel smart about the decision that they've made. And so we start to tie it a little bit more over to the heart side of the equation, a little bit more why it's personal to them. And we could certainly stop there, right? Like we could say, okay, we've reached the heart side of this equation, and that's emotion, right? And we feel like we've connected with them personally at the heart. But I think at that point, I might argue, is that really what they're looking for? Is that what that person wants at the end of the day? Is that really the driver they care about? And the answer, when you talk to the consumers, what you find is that there's an even deeper level. So granted, they're looking to make good choices, but they're making some of these choices for the first time, especially when it comes to millennials. And they're out there on their own, and now they're in the business world. And alternatively, what we find is that they're looking really for some kind of sense of achievement. I'm doing this, I'm achieving this, I'm making this decision, and that's ultimately what the driver is. And if you look at some of the work of Dr. Tom Reynolds, he would say basically, right, products and services are some kind of a means to an end state that I'm trying to achieve, and that's different for everybody. So for Mike, that might be excellent service in a trusted company, and he's driven by achievement, and he'll talk to us later. And Brian, he may say, look, it's all about the low rates for me so that I can save more money. So I also feel like a smart consumer, but I want others to perceive me as smart, and I want to kind of gain their respect from that. And so it becomes different for everybody, and this is what we call a decision chain at this point in time. And so as you can see here, on the next slide here, it's not as simple as maybe two chains, right? It becomes a little bit more complicated than a single chain. In fact, this is a simplified version of all the chains and connections that are out there in a specific space here, in this case, mortgage lending. And then you may say, okay, but what if we did this type of work across 3 different products, as I mentioned earlier, or even industries? Like, what would that look like, and where do these things, connect together, and what's the cross, I suppose, there? So here's what we did, and we're going to share some research that we did. So we looked across, as I mentioned, auto insurance, mortgage lending, and digital wallet, and we really wanted to understand what's the affinity towards these, financial service products, and then understand what the personal needs are. And we did it really in a 2-step process. So first we went out, and of course we talked to people. So we sat down with them one-on-one, and we conducted qualitative interviews to get those initial insights. But secondly, we had to take it a step further. We needed to validate that on a much larger sample set. And so that's what we set out to do next. So we did about 30 one-on-one qualitative interviews and about 600 responders through a national panel to help us validate that. And we were really, when we were looking at millennials here, we wanted millennials that were college graduates. They were employed full-time for at least greater than a year, and they could at least come up with $2,000. So either they're high value with where they're at today, or their potential is that they would be high value at a future point in time. And so that's kind of how we set up the study here. Now, this next slide that I'm going to share with you, if there's one thing that you take away from the presentation, and granted the rest is very important, but the next slide is one of the big, I guess, ahas that we had walked away from, honestly. We were actually a little surprised by it. When you look at the 3 different product categories, and you think about what those value drivers might be, it could be very different for each of those type of products. But here's what we found. What we found is that there were consistent themes across the 3 product categories. For example, we found at the highest levels of motivations, millennials are looking for these products to help them feel respected by others, as given in the example earlier. And then there's another group of millennials that are looking to maximize or enjoy life, or to live the good life, as they said, where they don't have to stress and worry about whether this product or service or the company says what it's going to do, so they can get back to enjoying life. And then there's a third group we found to be achievement driven. They really want to feel that they've achieved something. They're now making bigger decisions, and we saw these themes across each of the different product categories, which was a new learning for us that we are very excited about. And so you can almost start to think about these 3 different themes or motivations across the product categories as really almost like personas, right? So you have, those that are saying, like, it's important that people know that I'm financially responsible. I've kind of broken through the college barrier. I'm in my career now. I'm making these decisions for myself for the first time. You have those that just, they just don't have the time to jump through all the hoops, and they want this process to be made easy for them, whichever product category it is, so that they can enjoy the things that they want to do. And then lastly, we have this group that, they're looking maybe for the best deal that they get from the product, and they feel a sense of achievement there. So next, what we're going to do here, as we've introduced these 3 different, I guess you could call them archetypes, is we're going to do a poll. And I'm going to hand it over to Brian to take us through that poll here.
Thanks, Ethan. All right, so let's go ahead and go to our first poll question. And this is where you guys, as opposed to talking to yourselves in the room, you can actually participate via your computers. So the first poll question, what percentage of your millennial marketing strategy addresses gaining the respect of others, achievement, or enjoying life? And if you guys could go ahead and answer either A, B, C, D, or E. What percentage of your millennial marketing strategy at your current financial services company or bank addresses gaining the respect of others, achievement, or enjoying life? Okay, let's look at the results. So it looks like about 70%. We don't have a specific millennial marketing strategy. That's not surprising. That is the reason why we've done this segmentation, we've done this research, and that's the reason why we're having this webinar and starting to work with many of our clients in terms of building this marketing strategy, because like you've answered this poll, many of our clients have said the same thing. They don't have a specific millennial marketing strategy. Okay, let's continue with the discussion.
Yep, that's great. And so let's dive a little bit deeper here into each of these three different areas, and it'll be great if we could hear from those that do have the strategies. We'll share our perspective, and then but obviously in a webinar setting we can't get that feedback, but I just do want to share that we would love to hear that. And that's great to hear that some of you are tackling this area of millennials as a huge, we know that's a huge financial opportunity. And so as we start to dive into these three, and again, we look through the lens of the three different product categories, we'll provide first a brief statement for each of the persona types. Rather than sharing all three decision maps, which can get pretty complicated, and all their correlations back to the persona, we'll simply show the connections of each product into the underlying motivation that they seek. So, for example, here, the first persona craves respect. They need their product to make them look and feel smart, important and self-reliant, thereby gaining respect of others. So as we look over to the right-hand side now, starting with mortgage lending, we see at a base level, millennials seek to save money, to feel as a smart consumer for this product, which then drives to that respect from others. And so that's what we see from mortgage lending and how that ties into that needed respect that they're looking for. But then when you look at auto insurance, it's a little different, right? We see that they need coverage, coverage actually that meets their needs specifically, so that they feel self-reliant. The mom and dad didn't do this for me. I made this decision, and thus they're garnering that respect either from their parents or even from their peers. We heard in the interviews, and then again in the quantitative portion to validate that. And then third, when we look at digital wallet consumers that seek this product because it makes them look like a tech expert, it's an up-and-coming product, maybe potentially they're early adopters, and in turn they feel important to others as those others are seeking advice from them, and again, they're gaining that self-respect from others. So we can see in this example that across three different product categories, we see different attributes and maybe benefits that come from those products, but they're all tying back to the same thing. And so we begin to create, one of those themes or archetypes that we're seeing for millennials. And so if we take it a little step further, here, if we look at the size of the market, we find that about 20% of millennials are motivated by this. Now, I'd probably anecdotally argue that it's potentially a little higher than this, because many of you know, especially those with research background, when it comes to things of social acceptance, that's a little harder for people to admit to, even in an anonymous survey setting. But at least from what we heard from respondents, it's about 20% of the market is what we're seeing. So now, when you think about the implications of these, I'm coming with my product or service, and I need to position it to you, and that's your driver. But we need to talk, or I guess we need to take what we have and elevate that promise of us providing them with that social respect. So we need to make the connection between our products and their motivation. And later on, Mike will share some concrete examples of that later in this webinar. But for example, with value proposition and positioning, it might look something like, we are here to elevate the promise of elevating social respect from their decisions in messaging and creative. All right. So we'll keep going here. As we look at the next group, so this is the group that we found is driven by enjoying life. That idea of enjoying life, and this group really cares about that at the end of the day. I just want to have a good time. I want to enjoy that life, get back to what I like to do. And millennials, they're really busy. They don't always want to be connected, at least when it comes to things that they've purchased, like auto insurance. They don't want to be worrying about these things. They want life to be made, more simple. And they're used to things like Amazon. They're used to their phones maybe guiding them right through that process, and it's making it easier for them. They're trying to avoid the loss of time from hassle so that they can enjoy life and garner peace of mind in this example. And so off to the right, with mortgage lending, they're looking for a process that's easy and convenient, so that they don't have to experience that added stress to come back to, and so that they can come back to that aspect of enjoying life. Whereas with auto insurance, they don't want to waste time. They want things to be a little bit quicker. They aim to be productive, hoping to achieve that same ability to enjoy life. And then when we switch over there to digital wallet, this is one of the surprises I think that we saw come out of the research. Is we had expected convenience to really pop here from the perspective of being able to swipe at the register, but many folks, they actually found that it helped them to be organized. So they can pull down the data, they can strip the data from the application and be able to do, let's say, budgeting, which helps them to stay organized. So they don't have to think about one more thing that they can then avoid stress. And all these product categories, again, they're driving back up for allowing millennials to get back to enjoying life. That's one of their real drivers. So what does that look like from a market breakdown standpoint? We found that about 35 to about 40% of millennials care most about this motivator. And this is what's really driving them. When we think from an implication standpoint and being, again, able to elevate our message within the market, what are we doing? What are you doing as a marketer to tie your brand, to tie your product back to helping them enjoy life? What are the attributes of your own product to help them deliver that? And then what is the personal connection points? Those are some of the questions that we can ask ourselves. And if we're able to do that, we can have a higher ability then to resonate with that consumer, and in this case, specifically with millennials. And so in this example, again, right, we elevate the promise of our product's ability to reduce stress, and then secondly, to increase that messaging and creative treatment on delivering more time to focus on what they enjoy. So we're giving them back time so they can enjoy the things that they want to do. Now, as we look at the last group here, this perception of success, or this idea of achievement, is really critical. As it says here, they seek a sense of achievement by choosing the best product, which saves them time and money in these cases. And so as we continue around the windmill here, we see with mortgage lending, millennials, they're about customer service. That helps them to know that it's a trusted company, as we used in the example earlier. And maybe there's things that indicate that it's a trusted company within your own brand to make them feel like they've made a good or a wise decision. And how are we communicating those things? And then maybe visually showing somebody having made that good decision, or even in our media, right? How are we communicating that with the end consumer? right? So this helps to show that now they've stepped out of the sandbox, they're choosing a trusted company, and they have that sense of achievement in their lives. Now, when it comes to auto insurance, this is the example from earlier. They're looking for rates where they can save money, they can maximize the resources that they have, or stay within budget, right? And to be able to have that same sense of achievement, they're just getting it from a different way, right? It's a different product category, and so they're getting that fulfillment from something else, from that brand or the product. And then last, with digital wallet, this is what you'd probably expect: the convenience of being able to remove a purse filled with cards. But now I can easily swipe this and move on and save time and move on to do other things. So you kind of have that sense of convenience, which leads to that achievement. And as I mentioned earlier, each of these three different products have a much deeper connective tissue when you look from a consumer decisioning standpoint. And this is really the summarized way to bring it all together. So when we look again from a market standpoint, what we found is about 40 to 45% of millennials are motivated by this idea of achievement. This is one of the primary motivators that we're seeing, and we have to ask ourselves the question again: what's my value proposition to support that? Maybe what's the position that I have within the market, at least for this group of millennials, and how am I signaling personal success to them? How does my product or service, how does it deliver that for them today? And so we may say, right, like the idea here is to reinforce the purchase decision to signal to them their personal success, the personal success of that consumer. Now, I've taken you through some of the research, some high level, some more detailed. And now I'm going to hand it off to Mike Adamson. He's going to take us through the use cases and some real examples of how these can be applied.
Thank you very much, Ethan. That was great. I think first we're going to do a poll here. Quickly, with which segment that Ethan talked about there, do you think your brand would resonate with the most? We've got respected by others, the enjoy life segment, the achievement segment, or more than one of those, or maybe none. Give you guys a second there. Okay. Let's see. It looks like enjoy life and achievement are literally tied. So we've got a couple of brands really helping people get the most out of life there, it looks like. And then a lot of you more than one. Great. So I'm going to walk us through how we would actually take these insights and activate them in the marketplace, because it's easier said than done to go, oh, that's very interesting, but then to actually figure out who you're talking to and how to talk to them can be a pretty difficult approach. So the idea is, with understanding these motivations, to deliver the most impactful message to every single one of your customers. By knowing what drives them, we can then tune the message with a lot of targeting expertise and really activate them. The first step to doing that is to use motivational segmentation. There's a lot of different segmentation approaches out there. You probably all use life cycle, some sort of value-based segmentation, maybe behavioral segmentation, and adding motivational segmentation to your repertoire can really help you tune your message to your audience. One of the cool things about the quantitative element to our neuroanalytics process is that we can actually create motivational data and map it to your existing data segments. So all of a sudden you can understand, well, this media outlet tends to have people who value achievement, whereas this, renters who are $55,000 to $85,000 income earners value achievement over enjoying life. Now, with that information, we began crafting customer journey maps. The idea behind a good customer journey map is managing every moment in which your customer interacts with you. So everything from an email they open, to a display ad they see, to A phone call they make to your service reps is an opportunity to sway their perception of your brand and ideally their behavior as well. And you kind of want to have a contingency plan for every time they interact with you. So you show them an ad tuned to achievement and they don't click, okay, maybe try a respected by others ad next time. And all of a sudden you start to see what each individual resonates with, and then you can drive them into a particular journey that's tuned to that one motivation, and ideally see a big uplift in their engagement with you. Now, these journey maps only work if you already have that creative built for each of these different motivations. So I know there's probably not too many creative teams on the phone, but with the amount of strategy that you impact here, we can look at how you might equip your creative teams or your agencies to build really impactful messaging. So first, we're going to look at an example for the mortgage chain, or for the respected by others chain, excuse me. So you have really low rates and fees, and you're always wanting to push these low rates and fees, we'll say. But just talking about low rates and fees isn't necessarily going to get the attention of somebody who wants to be respected by others. You have to tie that to the motivation. So an ad might look like, get bragging rates. Find mortgage rates you can be excited about. All of a sudden, we're tying that product benefit or feature that you have to the deep personal benefit that your consumer is seeking. For the enjoy life chain, you might have an easy process and really beat the competition in how simple it is to sign up. You have to tie that to the idea of enjoying life by removing stress and hassle from the process, which might look like unbeatable anxiety prevention rates. Our easy process gives you great APRs. And our third example, looking at the achievement chain, something we saw is that to be a trusted company and then earn the moniker of achievement when somebody signs up with you, you have to give good customer service. And one way you can do that is taking the time to answer questions instead of maybe funneling somebody through an automated phone tree like too many companies do. So an ad there might look like, there are no stupid questions, just stupid service reps. We always answer your questions. Get your ideal mortgage. And here that idea of achievement is really seen in the CTA. And so actually the physical act of clicking that button to ideal mortgage can subconsciously trigger that idea of achievement. The important takeaway here with all three of these is that you can't just focus on the features, and you can't just focus on that deep motivation that's driving them either. As Ethan said earlier, you have to find a way to tie the head to the heart. And when you do that, all of a sudden an ad in our research becomes far more effective. So I know you're not all, as I said, creatives here, so we're going to look at some broader strategy takeaways for how you should interact with millennials in an overall strategy. There are three different imperatives we're going to cover here. Number one, make it easy and painless. Number two, create confidence in your brand and their choice. And number three, imply societal pressure and reward. We'll start with the first one here. Make it easy and painless. The first way to do this is to put the customer in control. You want to minimize the effort that's needed from them. One way this can apply is to long forms. I know we've all signed up for something and looked at 15 required fields in a form and been like, you don't need my astrological sign, this is ridiculous, just let me get to the part where I get what I want. Another thing I mentioned was phone trees. You need to have a quick escape so that the customer doesn't feel trapped. Another way to do this is to create tiers of information. Some readers want just quick overview facts. Some want to really dive deep and understand all the terms and conditions. And you need to give both of those customers exactly what they want, let them navigate. Information should be viewed as a faucet where you put them in control to turn it on as much as they want, rather than just hitting them in the face with a fire hose or sticking them trying to drink out of a trickle. The third way is to communicate in several media. This if you look at the Hello Wallet homepage that we have here, we've got videos, we've got infographics, we've got text. Again, some people like to watch their information, some like to read it, and you need to cater to both of those audiences. Finally, allow maximum use of every channel. If they want to get in touch with you and do what they need to via an app, via phone, in person, through the website, you want to enable them to do as much as possible. And I know there are boundaries in financial services sometimes about what can be done over what channels, but as much as possible, give them the power. All of this ties closely to UX principles. Really good UX means that the customer feels like it's an intuitive, smooth process. And this can happen by using transparency, like a progress bar, so they understand where they are in a process. It can be done by simple interactions. And finally, always user test, because a lot of the time our designers or our engineers will think that something's very intuitive, very common sense, and they're probably right a lot of the time, but betting on common sense in the general population isn't always a winning strategy. So make sure you're user testing, even engage in social listening, and you'll be able to identify some issues quickly and make it an easier customer process so that it doesn't come back to bite you. All right, now I'm going to hand it over to Brian for a poll here.
Okay, thank you. So here we go with another poll question. In what areas do you have unnecessary steps causing hassle for consumers? Again, in what areas do you have unnecessary steps causing hassle for consumers? Okay, and the results? Application process at 75%. That is no surprise. Again, Mike spoke to the breakdown in terms of long forms and complicated forms and unnecessary questions. And we tend to find when you take a look at the purchase funnel, and specifically as you're moving customers from awareness to consideration down to conversion, once they reach the application process, this is the barrier that is very challenging for most of you guys. So we do see that. We are putting forth recommendations to address that. I think as you work internally to figure out what you can do to address this challenge, I think it will help increase your conversion rates and provide future opportunity, especially for this generation who has low patience and are looking for a seamless customer experience and process. Okay, let's keep on moving forward.
All right, thanks, Brian. So our second imperative here is to create confidence in your brand and the user's choice. And there's a couple facets to this. First, in order to have that idea of achievement, that you got the deal you want to, there are two ingredients. You have to have a strong perception of the brand and a strong perception of the deal. So if you get a great deal with a cut rate on trustworthy brand, it doesn't feel like achievement. Anybody can do that. And if you go find the top leader brand and you just get hosed on the deal, you're not going to feel like you achieved very much there at all. So for a brand to tap into this motivation of achievement, they have to start thinking about how they can ramp up both of these levers. And there are several ways we know that brand trust can be achieved, and I'm going to hand it back to Brian to see which you guys think is the most impactful way to achieve this brand trust.
Okay, so now we're on poll question number 4. What's the most effective way to strengthen brand perception? What's the most effective way to strengthen brand perception? And the results? Provide great customer experiences, 75%. Yep, definitely great customer experience, and I think word of mouth, especially to this generation, is important. We have great customer experiences. right here. And they truly rely upon the experiences from their family and friends. Social media has driven the ability to, at any moment, share an experience. And that's a positive experience, that's a negative experience. We're all seeing that today across our different companies. So providing great customer experience is critical from a brand perception perspective. Great job, you guys. All right, let's continue moving forward.
Yeah, we clearly have a group of marketers in here that nobody chose have a superior product. It's all about that perception. And you guys are right, that we found in our research, great customer experiences create a trusted company. If you look at all the different attributes that we saw laddering up to this idea of trusted company, it's clear and prompt communication, receiving good reviews, excellent customer service, efficient problem resolution, taking time to answer questions. None of these are about the product. It's all about how that customer felt when interacting with the brand. So once you've got that high brand perception, you need to create confidence in the choice that the consumer makes. There are, some classic marketing tactics to do this, where you can have that one-time offer or some sort of deal that they feel helps them game the system, and all of a sudden they feel that confidence of, oh, look how smart I am, I achieved something. Like that company has no idea what hit them, clearly. And the other way you can do it, and this is, I'm sure, something most of you are doing already, but you have to have a strong welcome stream that as soon as they have enrolled in a service or bought a product, that is patting them on the back and telling them what a great job they did. And one of the interesting things you can do with this idea of motivational research, especially if you have a strong attribution system, is watch through a customer's journey by tagging different creative that they interact with. Watch what motivational driver in the creative pushes them through their entire journey. And then by the time they sign up, you can go, well, this guy wants to be respected by others. Let's send him a welcome stream that's tuned to that same motivation. And all of a sudden that will increase his feeling of having made a great choice even stronger. And our third one, imply societal pressure and reward. Now we know advertising has been doing this as long as it's been around, right? Buy our product and everybody will see you as the charming, handsome, and eloquent man that you want to be seen as. And we're seeing it in financial services. Venmo right now has an ad out called Pony Up, where it encourages people to pay on the spot so that they're not that guy who's saying, I'll get you back later, don't worry about it. All of a sudden you can be an adult and pay your friends and be perceived as the responsible, self-reliant, honest person that you are. Another way you can do this is gamification. This is a little bit of a sensitive subject in financial services because nobody wants to put out a winning score about their bank account to their friends on Facebook. You're not about to share your credit score. But there have been a few companies who have done this in an interesting way by different behavioral scores on how often you're doing healthy financial behaviors, or including social sharing. This image on the right that we have is from a brand that let you answer a few quiz questions and upload a picture and see what you would look like when you're ready to retire, which this guy in the ad clearly did a good job. So anytime you can give them something interesting to put out to their social circle, both you and the consumer win, especially if it's even just an article about healthy financial behavior. As soon as somebody is sharing that information, they take on a little bit of that glory of saying, look, I'm thinking about my financial future. I'm that smart person. You should see me that way, and you can do it too. So then both the brand and consumer win. So I'm going to hand it back to Brian to wrap us up here and help you guys look at where to start with your own brands. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mike. So let's start with some overarching strategy takeaways based upon the research to segmentation. So number one, millennials want financial institutions to consider their needs first. Look, I know the majority of us on the phone are all bankers, but we need to stop operating in the mindset of selling accounts, checking, mortgage, investments, etc. We get it. Banks need to shift this mindset to really understand where each customer segment is in their life stage and what their needs are. Their need is to buy a home, not to go into debt. Their need is to send their kids to college, not to go into debt. Marketers will do a better job connecting with the millennial audience once we start thinking about their needs and speaking in those terms. Number two, look past customer behavior and explore motivations. We have a wealth of first-party data. We have third-party data. All of this can inform our millennial approach, but we need to look beyond the behavioral data to understand why the behavior is occurring in the first place. The motivation. Is it that I want a trusted advisor? I want to be respected. I want to be known by my financial institution. Make sure you address the key purchase motivators in your messaging approach. Number three, add motivational segmentation to your repertoire. One of the greatest opportunities of understanding emotions is the ability to segment based upon them. First, analyze the demographic information of each segment. Next, start building a communication plan for each segment, accumulating in a series of journey maps. Leverage the data to add motivational segmentation to your repertoire. Can not only increase engagement with ads, but can be used to inform the customer experience. Number four, target individuals based on segmentation and channel preference. We know millennials have a heavy bent towards technology. We know that they love digital. So why are we continuing to mail this group, even though they're interacting every day across digital channels and devices? And they're saying, speak to us through the device that I choose, not the channel, not the device that you choose. Let the customer decide how, when, and why to interact. The customer wants to be in control, not to be told what to do. Minimize the hassle by providing transparency about the process. Number five, leverage this data to enhance interactions and communication. So again, we have similarly endless data about millennials, but we need the so what. Answer the so what. This is important as you build your successful millennial program strategy in 2017. And finally, number six, utilize a multi-channel approach to customer communications. Every customer journey is unique across multiple channels and interactions. Ideally, you'll have a contingency plan for every moment in the customer's journey, whether they're at the top of the funnel or at the bottom of the funnel. If they open a formative email, you'll send a second one that builds on that message. If they visit the website but they don't enroll, you might retarget them with display ads pushing the right benefit. Make sure you construct a well-constructed journey map that seeks to understand the customer's objective at every moment and react to their behavior in a way to help them reach their objectives. You want to have each customer's journey aligned to the value driving that customer. Okay, now I'm going to turn it back over to Zoe.
Thanks, Brian. First of all, I'd like to thank Brian, Ethan, and Mike for sharing today's webinar with us. It looks like we've received several questions, and as a reminder, if you do have any additional questions, please submit them through the Q&A icon on your screen, or you can tweet to them at Merkle CRM using the hashtag #MerkleWebinar. Okay, so let's get to the questions in the remaining time. So the first one I'm going to send over to you, Brian. And that's, do millennials have preferences and on how they use branches versus digital channels?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Zoe. I think they do have preferences, and it really is driven based upon the interaction and their expectations. So what we know as marketers, our job is to move customers across the purchase funnel. Again, starting with awareness, ending in conversion. We know from awareness and consideration perspective, millennials are conducting their research online. They're conducting their research first prior to purchase, and they're relying on word of mouth after they've done their research. They're doing this via their phones and their tablets primarily, okay? But the barrier in terms of, online conversion is the application process. If you go back to the earlier poll question, the majority of you guys have stated that your application process needs work. So that's barrier number one that actually is preventing millennials from doing more online and converting online. And then in reference to the branch, if they cannot go through the application process, or if they have a complicated transaction. So we consider a complicated transaction to be a mortgage, an investment account, et cetera. We tend to find that their preference is still a branch as opposed to an online process. The reason being is that even though they have informed and educated themselves online, they need the advice of someone at the branch to really speak to the product and speak to the complicated nature of the transaction that they are about to conduct. So I would say, application process is a barrier. And then for those who choose the branch, it's because they have a more complicated transaction, okay, or they have a problem and they need some assistance in terms of solving that problem. Back to you, Zoe.
Oh, thanks, Brian. Let's see, the next question, this one I'm going to send over to you, Ethan. Is it possible to map these types of segments we've been talking about into a database for targeting?
Oh, good question. So mapping into a database. We get that question quite a bit, and I think it's a good question. I think the reason that people are probably asking that is because we're talking about emotions. And if you look back, I guess if you think back on like the history of segmentation, right? Like maybe around in the 50s and 60s is when we started doing more demographic-based segmentations, kind of propel thinking the early 2000s, and before that, attitudinal kind of segmentations became pretty popular. But as you start to think about motivation-based segmentations, I suppose here, the question becomes, how do you tie emotions or motivations into some type of database? And we've actually done that. So we've had some success. Obviously, you can't do it from the qualitative side, but one of the reasons I mentioned earlier we go out and do a quantitative study is really for two things. One is to verify the research, but two is to collect PII, name and address, or you can actually now grab like digital IDs online or pixels. And you can match that back to a database then to then get a larger sample set, so a much larger sample set, to then go in and create models. Now, if you're a modeler, you know that the model is never going to be perfect. It's never going to be a one-to-one match of somebody, but it does give you a good indication of which group they may fall into. And I think Mike actually mentioned it too. There has to be a test and optimize portion to it as well, where you kind of learn based on their responses. So one, from a direct targeting like people-based, definitely yes, but then two, we have to test and optimize as well. So I think that's how I'd answer that question.
Great, thank you, Ethan. And we have time for one final question, which I'm going to send over to you, Mike. When it comes to seeking the respect of others, does this refer to the product itself, the bank, or both?
Okay, that's a good question. Really, that could be asked for any motivation. Do you want to make this about the brand or about the product? What's going to be the most impactful? And the answer is either one, as long as it's done deliberately, I think. As a brand marketing team, you need to decide if you think the space is ownable in the marketplace. For example, is there somebody already owning, respected by others, the way that maybe Rolex in the watch industry own that? You know, can we own that? Or, and if you can, great. If you can be the brand that will rocket millennials to the top of their social sphere, it's probably going to be a really effective marketing approach. But if not, then it's important to look at how your product does that. And like I said before, in the marketing, tie these specific product features to that brand promise so that people understand how that product will help them be respected by others.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mike. That's all the time we have today for questions. If we didn't get to your question during the Q&A portion, we will be following up with you with an email response in the coming days. And in the next few days, you'll also receive an email with a link to this webinar as an on-demand version if you'd like to revisit it. And thank you again to our three speakers, Brian, Ethan, and Mike. And thanks again to all of you for joining us today. Thank you very much and have a great day.